Welcome to the Open Mic, the show where we discuss pretty much everything. And today we're going to be doing a deep dive into a recent movie that's been causing a bit of a stir online, The Ballad of Wallis Island.
Ooh, intriguing title.
It is, isn't it? You actually sent me a review of it from RogerEbert.com, written by Robert Daniels.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting take. You know, it kind of captured the feel of the film, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So the goal today is to kind of break down that review, pull out the key insights. So for you listening, you can get a sense of, what the film's about, what it does well, maybe where it falls short.
Exactly. The good, the bad, and the Wallis Island. All that, without having to read the whole review, right?
Exactly. We'll do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
So let's just jump right into it, shall we?
Yeah.
The premise of this movie, it's a bit unusual.
Okay, so the film starts with this folk musician, Herb McGuire, and he's traveling to this remote island called, you guessed it, Wallis Island.
Right. Wallis Island.
Thinking he's going to be playing a gig for, a bunch of adoring fans.
Right, like a proper concert.
A proper concert, yeah. But according to the review, the reality is a little different.
A little different? How so?
It turns out he's there for a private concert. For one person. Just one.
One person. Wow. Okay. That's already got my attention.
Yeah, and this one person is Charles. He's a 2-time lottery winner.
Lucky guy.
And get this, deeply, deeply obsessed with Herb's old band.
Oh.
McGuire and Mortimer.
Okay, so it was a duo.
It was a duo back in the day, yeah. And this Charles, he owns all their old instruments, memorabilia, you name it.
Like a shrine to their music.
The full-on shrine. You can almost feel the weight of that obsession in the review. It kind of makes you wonder, how does someone become so fixated on a band?
It's almost uncomfortable to think about, right? Like having that level of someone else's past right there in your living room, it's a bit intense.
Totally. And the review kind of hints that intensity, that awkwardness, is actually a big part of what makes the film charming.
Right. So it's not just like a creepy stalker situation. It's playing with that tension in a way that's, I guess, supposed to be funny.
Yeah, definitely comedic. But then it's not just about the initial awkwardness. The review then talks about how this kind of uncomfortable relationship, it actually blossoms into something almost heartwarming.
So they form a bond.
They do. And the review actually uses this really interesting phrase. It says that this budding, albeit awkward friendship massages the sweet pulse of a delightful movie.
Massages the sweet pulse.
Yeah.
That's quite a visual, isn't it?
It is. What do you get from that phrase, massages?
I mean, massages, to me, it suggests something gentle, right? Something that's not forced, like it's not a sudden, best friends forever kind of thing. It's something that develops slowly, organically.
Yeah, like through these subtle interactions, shared experiences.
Exactly. And the fact that they're on this remote island, right? That has to play a part.
Oh, absolutely. It's like they're in this pressure cooker of weirdness. And somehow something beautiful emerges from that.
It's an interesting concept, right? Like you wouldn't think that an obsessive fan and a jaded musician would be the recipe for a heartwarming story.
No, you wouldn't. But, that's the magic of movies sometimes. They take these unlikely pairings and find the humanity in them.
And speaking of the people behind this magic, the review talks about the creative team.
Yeah, so the director is James Griffith. And apparently this film is actually based on a short film he made earlier.
Oh, okay. So it's like an expanded version.
Exactly, yeah. And what's interesting is that the two actors, Tom Basden, who plays Herb, and Tim Key, who plays Charles, they also wrote the screenplay.
They did? Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the reviewer seems to think that's a positive thing. What do you think about that, when actors are involved in the writing process?
Well, I mean, it makes sense to me. I mean, they're the ones who are going to be inhabiting these characters, right? So to have a hand in shaping their dialogue, their motivations, it just seems like it would add a level of authenticity.
Right, like a deeper understanding.
Exactly. And the review actually praises the film for its seemingly spontaneous humor, the original folk tunes.
Which, makes sense given the folk musician protagonist.
Right. And it also mentions the beautiful setting of Wallis Island.
Ah, yes, Wallis Island.
So, it sounds like they really created a cohesive vision, this actor, writer, director team.
A true collaboration.
Yeah. And speaking of Wallis Island, the review really emphasizes the sense of place the film creates.
Yeah, it uses this phrase, exceptional sense of place. It's described as being verdant and inspiringly detailed.
I remember you mentioning Herb's arrival on the island. It's not exactly glamorous, is it?
No, not at all. He arrives by motorboat. And there's no dry dock, so he has to, wade ashore.
Okay, so already we're getting this sense of isolation, right? It's not your typical tropical paradise.
Not at all. And then when Charles greets him, it's with a mini whiteboard.
A mini whiteboard, that's a choice.
Right. It's these little details that start to paint a picture of this quirky kind of offbeat place.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical tourist destination. And the review mentions that the island itself is pretty basic. No hotels, no stadiums, not even a well-stocked store, apparently.
Yeah, just one little shop. And it rarely has anything in it.
So they're really stuck there.
Yeah.
With each other.
Yeah.
And what Herb thinks is Wallis Lodge turns out to just be Charles's house.
Yeah, so it's this really intimate setting, very lived in, slightly worn.
But the interesting thing is, the reviewer notes that the cinematography captures these spaces with affection.
Yeah, so it's not like they're trying to make it look gritty or depressing. It's more like they're embracing the charm of these slightly rundown places.
Right, it's like the island itself has a personality. And it's a character in the film.
Exactly.
Which, when you think about it, that kind of makes sense, right? Because the setting really does shape the dynamic between Herb and Charles.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, they're trapped in this weird little world together. And they have to figure out how to coexist.
And then things get even more complicated when Herb's former bandmate and ex-girlfriend, Nell, shows up, along with her new husband, Michael.
Ah, Nell. The plot thickens.
Yeah, so, obviously this raises a lot of questions. What is she doing on this remote island?
Well, the review reveals that it was actually Charles who orchestrated this whole reunion. He's the one who brought them there.
He did? Why?
Because, get this, he wants to see Maguire and Mortimer perform together again.
Oh, wow. So he's not just a fan. He's like a puppet master.
Yeah, a bit of a puppet master. And, you have to wonder, is he doing this out of genuine love for their music? Or is there something a little more, I don't know, manipulative going on?
Right, because bringing Nell back into the picture, especially with her new husband, that has the potential to be, well, pretty explosive.
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely some dramatic potential there. And the review actually draws some interesting comparisons to other films to give us a sense of the overall tone and style.
Oh, like what?
So initially, it mentions a similarity to Juliet Naked, which also deals with, obsessive fandom.
Okay, so that kind of sets the stage.
Yeah, but then it goes on to compare the core dynamic between Herb and Charles to planes, trains, and automobiles.
Really? That's a classic.
It is, isn't it? And the reviewer specifically positions Charles as the well-meaning but clueless Del Griffith type.
Okay, I can see that.
And Herb as the more jaded Steve Martin-esque figure.
Right, the one who's constantly being exasperated.
Exactly. And the review even includes this line from Charles, "There's a wowzer for your trousers."
Oh, that's so Del Griffith.
It is, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think? What does that comparison tell us about the film's comedic approach?
Well, planes, trains, and automobiles, it's a very specific kind of humor. It's very much about the clash of personalities. That kind of awkward situational comedy that arises from these two very different people being forced together.
Right. And then you have those classic lines, those quotable moments.
Exactly. So, it seems like the Ballad of Wallis Island is going for that same kind of vibe. A lot of character-driven humor, maybe some broad physical comedy, but hopefully, done in a way that's endearing.
Right. Not too over the top. And the review actually makes a point of saying that while Charles could easily be a caricature, the actor, Tim Key, he brings this really crucial balance to the role. He makes him both adorable and annoying.
Oh, that's a tough line to walk.
It is. But apparently he pulls it off, and he also subtly hints at this underlying grief that Charles is carrying.
Oh, okay. So there's more to him than just being this goofy fanboy.
Exactly. He's a fully realized character with his own emotional baggage.
Which kind of makes you wonder, what's the source of that grief? Is it connected to his obsession with the band?
That's a good question. And the review doesn't really give us the answer, but it does make you, curious about his backstory.
Yeah, definitely. So, so far, it sounds like Charles is really the standout character.
It does seem to be the most dynamic, the most intriguing.
And actually, the review does point out a potential weakness of the film, and that's that it focuses a bit too much on Herb.
Oh.
Yeah, who's described as being, well, a fairly uninteresting character on his own.
Ouch.
Yeah, he's seen as this washed-up star, clinging to his fading career. And he doesn't really have the charm or the tragedy that would make him compelling in his own right.
So he's kind of just reacting to the more colorful personalities around him.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
And the reviewer actually draws a contrast with someone like Hugh Grant in music and lyrics.
Oh, okay.
Where you're really invested in that character's potential for growth and redemption.
Right.
But here, it sounds like Herb is more of a passive figure.
Yeah.
So, for the viewer, that might mean that their enjoyment of the film really hinges on how much they connect with Charles and Nell.
Right. So it's the relationships that really drive the film.
It seems that way. And actually, the review specifically states that Nell's arrival is crucial in making Herb a more complete character.
Okay, so she brings something out in him.
She does. And it's interesting because the review points out that Herb's solo music lacks a distinct identity.
So it's like he's lost his creative spark.
Yeah, and it's implied that his past partnership with Nell, both musically and romantically, that's where his true self resided.
Oh, interesting. So there's this potential for them to rekindle something, both creatively and personally.
It seems that way. And the reviewer actually praises the chemistry between the two actors, Tom Basden and Carey Mulligan.
Okay, so they have good on-screen rapport.
They do. And it's noted that Nell's warmth really brings out Herb's, his inner life.
Okay, so she kind of softens him, makes him more human.
Exactly. And together, they actually feel like real people, with a shared history and an uncertain future.
It's always nice when you feel that genuine connection between characters, isn't it?
It is. So, even though Herb might not be the most fascinating character on his own, it's the dynamics between these three characters that really seem to be the heart of the film.
And those dynamics, they touch on some pretty universal themes.
Right. Like what?
Well, the review actually argues that the Ballad of Wallis Island, it's not just about these individual relationships. It's a delicate picture invested in the pain of moving on. The pain of moving on. That's a powerful idea. It is. And when you think about it, all three of these characters are grappling with that in some way. Right. You have Herb, who's, clinging to his past glory. Yeah, unable to let go of the success he had with Nell. And then you have Charles, who's, obsessed with this bygone era of their music. Right. Like he's trying to freeze time. And Nell, she's moved on in a sense, but you have to wonder, is there still a part of her that's drawn to Herb? Yeah, and how does she navigate that, with her new husband in the picture? It's complex, and the review actually suggests that the film explores the impossibility of truly recapturing the past. Even with the best of intentions, like Charles trying to get the band back together. Right, and it sounds like the film finds a kind of warmth in accepting that reality. Right. That sometimes you can't go back. But you can move forward. Exactly. And you can find new sources of joy and meaning, even if they're different from what you once had. It's a bittersweet message, but it's also, ultimately hopeful. Yeah, I think so. And the reviewer, he notes that the film premiered at Sundance, and it opened on March 28th, 2025. So fairly recently. Yeah, very recently. And, the fact that it premiered at Sundance, that's usually a good sign. It is. It suggests that there's something special about this film. Definitely. So to kind of sum it all up, based on this review, The Ballad of Wallis Island, it sounds like a charming, often funny film that really delves into these complicated relationships. And it does it in a way that's both heartwarming and thought-provoking. Exactly. It's set in this unique and vividly portrayed location. And it features some really strong performances, especially from Tim Key as Charles. Right. He seems to be the real standout. Even though, the main character, Herb, might not be the most compelling on his own. But it's the interplay between the three of them that really seems to be where the film shines. Yeah, and that interplay explores these really universal themes of moving on, letting go of the past, and finding new ways to connect. And I think there's something really powerful in that message, because we all experience loss and change in our lives, and it's not always easy to navigate those transitions. No, it's not. But this film seems to suggest that there is beauty and humor to be found in those messy, imperfect journeys. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's not always about getting back to where you were. Sometimes it's about discovering something new, something unexpected. And maybe finding that the wowzer was in your trousers all along.
Oh, you had to go there.
Couldn't resist.
All right. Well, hopefully that gives you listening a good sense of what the Ballad of Wallis Island is all about. We'd love to hear your thoughts if you've seen a film.
Or even if you haven't, maybe this review, this deep dive has piqued your interest.
Definitely. So feel free to share your opinions, your feedback with us at theopenmicpodcasts@gmail.com.
We'd love to hear from you.
Always.
Always.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time.